window. There we go. Broadcast is starting.
Yay. Good.
Oh, stop.
Tam, we can hear Eris a little bit.
Okay. Okay. Hi, everybody. So what we would love for you to do in the chat is to go ahead and put in where you're from. And I'll start it off. I'll model it. So I'm in New England with the leaves falling all around me. And so we want you to do the same thing. Where are you? And say, like, I am here with this. So Joan, why don't you go ahead and say I am where you are with blank.
Okay.
This is complicated.
I am just on the edge of Boston on the Charles River, and outside my window, all the crew teams are practicing for a big regatta next weekend. So I can hear the coaches yelling through the window.
I love that. I love that. Karma, love, you're not getting any picture or sound. Okay. And let's see. Sarah, can you go ahead and put up her PowerPoint? So everyone there we go. Okay.
So I'm reading some New York City with windy trees, Iowa City, cool, looking at the summer.
We have another one from Boston, Texas.
Yeah. Arlington, Virginia, Philadelphia. Oh, cool. Look at all of this. Bird song, fall colors in Ontario. Massachusetts the flowers are still blooming here. It's really strange. Okay. Well, thank you all for that. We'll keep watching it. Being that I'm a very distractible type, I have to turn the chat off because otherwise I won't focus. So Tammy, take it away.
Okay. Am I a distractible type too, Joan? I've never heard that before. There are types that are distractible. I'm going to ask you that question. Not now. I'm distracting you with that question, but I'll ask you that later. So my name is Tammy Sollenberger. I'm a white, cisgendered, heterosexual female. I live in Dover, New Hampshire, on the land of the Abenaki, Pennacook, and Wapanaki people. I'm a certified IFS therapist and I'm a consultant. I host an IFS podcast called The One Inside, where I chat with various members of the IFS community, including Joan. We did one a long time ago, and we plan to do an Enneagram and IFS series, which we haven't totally figured that out yet, but that's what we have that coming up soon. I have a 10-year-old son who's actually sick home today, playing Fortnite in the other room. So I'll probably holler at him a couple times to keep his voice down. I'm super, super excited to be here with Joan. Joan and I are good friends and we talk about the Enneagram all the time. And I'm a type 3. And if you know me or you follow me on Instagram and all those things, it's very clear that I'm a type 3. All right, Joan, tell us about you.
So I'm Joan Ryan. I am a cisgendered white woman on the older side, which I get is a diversity. In Watertown, Massachusetts, which is just on the border of Cambridge and Boston. I'm IFS level 1 trained. I am a lawyer by background, although I don't admit it very often anymore. For the last 20 years, I've been working as a leadership coach and an organization development professional. I coach in all different kinds of places. I've been all over the world, both coaching and teaching the Enneagram. I'm certified in the Enneagram by what was originally the Palmer and Daniels School, where I was the program director for a long time. And Enneagram is really my passion.
Eris.
Putting it together with IFS has just been amazing.
You have to stop talking altogether, okay?
And Tammy and I have been working together for about a year, and she will explain to you the parameters of the project that we're working on. Oh, and I am on the ancestral lands of the Massachusetts and Pawtucket tribes. Tam? We lost
I'm
Tam.
here. Hold on.
Okay,
I'm here.
okay. Do you want me to keep going?
Sorry, I'm gonna move inside. I think my internet's a little bit funky when I was outside.
Okay,
Sorry about that.
all right.
Okay.
So if you
What
can,
were you saying anything interesting? What did I miss?
well, that we've been working together a lot. And the one thing I didn't say is that we run a group of IFS therapists where we're exploring this intersection between the two systems. And we just started our second round with that group, and it's been really, really fascinating. So we can go to the next slide, please. Tammy?
I'm here.
And I can say that the PowerPoint will be made available, but we won't make it available until after the presentation. The other thing that we wanted to point out is you'll see in the chat a link to two very basic handouts. One is a map of the Enneagram that looks like this, very simple with my handwritten names on it. And the other is just a sheet for you to take some notes, which lists the order of the things that we're going to do. So if you feel like it, download those and you can use them for notes.
Yes, okay. I love it. I love it. Sorry about that, you guys. I don't understand why the internet worked for a full half hour beforehand as soon as we started.
It's a win. Okay, so we're on slide 2. Over to you.
Perfect. Okay, slide 2. So we're going to do an introduction to the Enneagram system and how we've been exploring the intersection between the Enneagram and IFS. So Joan and I have been doing that since our podcast, which what was that, a couple of years ago, maybe?
November last year.
Last year, okay. With COVID, I've completely lost track of all time. I'm like, that was 5 years ago. And so Joan and I have done that between ourselves. We've gotten together to do that. We talk about, I could call Joan and say, this is what's happening in my life. And Joan frames it in Enneagram terms. And we just end up having just so many casual conversations about it. And so we've done that personally. And then like Joan says, we have a group that we ran a group last year, we're running a group right now. And so we just keep having this conversation. We've had a couple conversations with Dick about it, which was really exciting. So that's what we're doing today. We're just going to have a further exploration about these two amazing systems that we both love and we find can be incredibly helpful for healing and for self-energy. And so one of the things that we really believe is each type encompasses a set or a group of parts. So it's not just one part. So I'm a 3, and sometimes I talk about my 3 part and how she is, but it's often not just one part, it's a group of parts. And then we talk about, or we're going to talk today about how the Enneagram the map of the Enneagram, the 9 points on the Enneagram can provide guide and guidance to access self-energy. And then Joan's website's on there and my website's on there for further information about us and about what we're doing. So definitely check out us. Check us out. Okay, next slide.
Okay, so as Tammy said, we've been working with a hypothesis that the Enneagram is a grouping, or the word that keeps coming up is constellation of parts. And that group is going to be unique to the individual, but there'll be some common elements. And what we're starting to find is that there are always common concerns and some common protectors, managers, and firefighters. So we're starting to add another map of those parts around the types. And I should say at this point that if you know absolutely nothing about the Enneagram, we will be explaining that in a few minutes. So don't worry if you don't. If you know the Enneagram, we're going to ask you to look at it just as if you'd never seen it before. And again, that's part of our exploration. We're looking at how the two systems intersect and maybe how they're different. And also we're looking at self-energy, and we're looking at the map as an access point. My Enneagram training tells me that the access point to the higher aspects of each type is through a specific a specific quality that then lets us into the grouping of the 9 qualities that the Enneagram maps, and they're really close to the 8 Cs. So we'll go to that later. We also want to use IFS to try to locate what is unconscious in us that is relevant to the Enneagram. Tammy? Next slide, please.
Okay. Can you hear the boy when I'm talking? Is that what's happening? I'm told him to get off the computer.
It's quiet now.
What?
It's quiet now. It's okay.
Jeez. Okay, so our learning agenda is how the IFS technique, the protocols in IFS, which hopefully you guys are somewhat familiar with IFS since you're here and it's the 3rd day of the, that sounds so judgmental. I don't mean that judgmental. So how the techniques and protocols support deeper inquiry into the structure of an individual's personality using the core and connected types, Enneagram types as guides. So I hope that makes somewhat sense. We'll talk more about that, obviously. We'll talk about how we can use IFS parts to help identify the Enneagram type and vice versa. So sometimes you might not know your type or you might not really be that aware of your parts, but both will inform each other. It's kind of fun. It's fun to use the systems to help deepen your own awareness and self-observation. And we're gonna do a couple exercises in practice and for you to do, and you can do these on your own, but we'll talk about them in the chat too. And then we'll just cover basic information about IFS and the Enneagram, just to have a little bit of a base. And if you guys have any questions about those things, obviously put them in the chat and we'll try to get to, we'll have space for questions, but we'll try to get to all the questions. Next slide.
Okay, so we're not going to go through all of this, but we put this in because this is an example of the kind of workshop norms, or some people call them ground rules, that I would use in an Enneagram workshop, or Tammy and I together would use if we were teaching IFS. The one that we want to highlight today is beginner's mind, which most of you know as a very basic Buddhist concept, that we come looking at something with openness and curiosity, and a lack of prejudgment, just to see what we can see. I want to add one that's not on the list that I learned from something else I was watching the other day, and it really struck me, and that is welcome mistakes. Mistakes are great teachers, and I just really loved that that came up as a ground rule, so I want to add it. Next slide, please. Okay, so we have somebody who's going to try to track this for us, but if you know your type, or if you think you know your type, would you put the number in the chat? We're trying to get a sense of how much Enneagram knowledge is in the room, and that will guide a little bit how I describe the types. So we'll give you a few minutes to do that, and we'll go to the next slide as you go along and do that. Oh, and by the way, I'm a type 9, which is where the distractible comes from, any of you that know 9s. So there's that. So the base skill that I use in all my coaching, in all my training, and in all my Enneagram work, and that all of you know if you're practicing with IFS in any way, is self-observation. And some time ago, I was trying to get some definitions, and I found myself saying very often, and my clients saying back to me, you can't change something that you can't see. And apparently I say it all the time. It's a good thing that I believe it, because I say it all the time. When I researched it, I found out that Aristotle and his philosophies are an underlayment to this. So he says, and I'm, taking some liberties here, that knowing yourself is the beginning of all wisdom. So that's the self-observation. That good character and good friends are conducive to self-knowledge. To me, that's feedback. That good friends tell you the truth and help you see yourself as others see you. To me, that's coaching or therapy. And friends of good character can help us avoid self-deception and enable us to see that misperceptions may cloud our judgment. So if you put that all together, you get good character equals good self-observer, non-judgment, non-reactive, and centered. So we're walking towards self-energy here. As I said, strong self-observation is a required skill for sustainable development. And two other things that have come out really strongly. One is that many people do not know that they're not seeing or reporting on themselves objectively. And this is one of the things that IFS and the Enneagram can help them to learn. And the other that's very common is that many people really are unaware that their impact on other people differs from their intention. And this is another key to continuing to be curious and motivated to work on self-observation. Okay, so next slide.
I love that, Joan. The other thing I was thinking about that is I heard this one time that it's like we're all in a movie theater, but we're watching a different movie. And we assume everyone's watching the same movie as us.
Yeah,
so I think and we're not. And I think that's so interesting. I think that's one of the gifts of the Enneagram is that when I realized that my partner, my friend is actually a different number. And so what movie they're watching is different, then it helps me understand their reactions or their thoughts or the way their behavior just gives me an understanding of like, oh, they're watching a different movie.
Right. Okay, so this is a very, very brief meditation. And you can close your eyes or not, whatever is comfortable for you. And what it is actually, rather than a meditation, is it's a little practice about attention. And one of the things that I learned a long time ago, that our attention is one of the few things that we have complete control over when we pay attention to our attention. And what that means is that we can shift our attention. Many of you that are familiar with mindfulness or any kind of meditation know this. So way back when Helen Palmer, who's my primary teacher, was developing the training that she did this little attentional practice that stuck with me for 25 years. So I'm going to offer it to you. So if you close your eyes, I'm going to ask you to gather up your attention as best you can. You can't do this wrong. Gather up your attention and place it in the middle of the room that you're sitting in. Just put your attention at some point in the middle of the room. And you'll start to think and your mind will wander, and all of that is 100% normal. But try to focus again in the middle of the room. And now gather up that attention and place it on a spot against the far wall. Just all of your attention against the wall. And again, your mind will wander and you get distracted. Gather it up again and focus it on that spot on the far wall. And I apologize, I closed my eyes because it's the only way I can do this. Now take that attention that's from the far wall and bring it in front of you at about the distance you'd use to read a book. And again, with distraction and all of that, try the best you can to focus it at book reading distance in front of you. And now the last jump, which is actually the hardest and the most important. Gather all that attention and bring it inside of yourself so that your perspective comes inside out. And I'd ask you to take a couple of deep breaths and see if you can open your eyes with your attention inside of yourself. And just make note if that's different than the way you felt before you did this. Okay, next slide, please.
Okay. If anybody wants to write anything they noticed in the chat, feel free to do that. And I'm just going to do a little bit. I love that exercise, Joan. It's surprisingly powerful.
What are you guys doing?
Okay, so these are, some of you guys might know, but I wrote a book and it's called The One Inside 30 Days to Your Authentic Self. And so it'll be out in December. And so here are a couple of just little IFS basics that we pulled from the book, just to give you a little bit of a foundation about IFS. So one of the things that, we just did, and that we will continue to ask you to do, is sort of check how right, that that you're in a part, is when you take a minute or two to just turn inside. Like, what are you hearing? What are you experiencing? Even right now, is you're a little bit, maybe a part is frustrated about the slides and how small they are, or a part that's frustrated that you can hear my kid playing Fortnite in the other room, or my internet keeps going out. What are all these things that are happening to me, actually, that are triggering parts of me? Like, I'm noticing that. So I would invite you, as you're sitting with us in this presentation, like, what are you noticing? What thoughts are you noticing? What sensations are you noticing? What feelings are you noticing? And those might give you some clues to what parts are up. Like, what parts are up? They might not be driving the bus. Like, my parts aren't driving the bus right now, but I'm very aware. I'm aware of them. I'm aware of these little touches that are all around me. And so I would encourage you, if you have a piece of paper or you have the handout, just to start tracking that. Like, what are you noticing that isn't necessarily about Joan or I or the PowerPoint or the presentation or the conference? It's really about your own system. And so that's what we want to just keep inviting you, those observation skills of turning inside and noticing that. And that's going to tell you about your system, which is going to tell you about your parts, and it's also going to tell you something about your type. And then I want you to, when I'm talking to new clients or new people about IFS, and sort of they're like, I'm not sure. I often just say, like, just notice how many times you say, a part of me thinks this, or a part of me feels this way, because that's really familiar and really just a human experience, the way we all think and the way that we all talk, the way we talk to each other. And so, and I want you to sort of notice that, right? Notice how we begin to just start, if you're not kind of immersed in the IFS community, that you begin to start thinking, oh, a part of me is frustrated about this, a part of me is excited about this, a part of me is paying attention, and a part of me is not paying attention. And then I think as we listen inside, we begin to interact with our parts differently, and even thinking of who's the one that is noticing the parts. Who's the one that's noticing, oh, there's a part that's frustrated. Oh, there's a part that's excited. Oh, there's a part that can't wait for this to happen later on tonight. Who is the one that's noticing all of the parts? Okay, next slide. Okay, and then that is self, right? And so when I think about self, I think about the metaphor and the feeling of home. Like, self feels like home. And feels like that a metaphor for coming back to your true self. Home is that, like, warmness. It's an open heart. It's a stillness. Sometimes it takes over your mind. And I think the thing is self, the feeling and experience of self, can be different for everybody, and it is different for everybody. And I think that it's just so important for us to know, what does it feel like in my body, in my mind, in my spirit, when I am in self, or when I have a more self energy, or when I'm noticing that I'm with self with my parts. What is that feeling and experience like? And so we know when we have it. We know what it feels like in our bodies. We know what it feels like in our system. And I think that's just so important to really have a connection to what that feels like. And then you probably know this, that we think about self in the words, the C words, the C qualities: creative, curious, confident, courageous, clear-minded, compassionate, centered, and also the P qualities. They aren't there, but the P qualities of patience, persistence, playfulness, like, those are also the qualities of self. And then I heard that there was one, I wasn't in the workshop, but someone was saying that there are also B qualities, which I thought was so interesting. And people are doing this I love this. Like, people are taking these concepts that Dick came up with, and they're evolving. I think that's what's so cool about this conference, and we're hearing over and over again, is how people are really taking these concepts and making them their own for their own cultures. So yeah, so I'm just going to check on this chat and see if there's any questions. If anybody has any basic questions about IFS. I just see this isn't noticing a part and not self. Can you say more about that? What does that mean, Anne? So if I'm noticing a part, that doesn't necessarily mean that the I is self. It depends on how I feel towards the part, right? But that could be the beginning of it, right? Like, who is the one noticing? If I'm noticing with the C qualities, if I'm noticing with calmness, curiosity, then that is probably self. If I'm noticing a part with irritation, then that's another part.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, good. Okay.
Yeah.
Let's go to the next slide. I see in the chat there are a
Thank
couple
you.
of
Yes.
questions about Enneagram type, and I don't want to get off track, so let me see if I can bring them in. So here's some basics about the Enneagram. There are 9 types. The next slide will show you a diagram, but I'll show you a diagram like that. It's a wonky looking 9-pointed star enclosed in a circle. And the things that are important are here. Each of these types has an equally valid but different perspective through which they see the world. It's really important, that equally part, to remember. They're interconnected on a map or a diagram. This is what makes it complex and, to my mind, interesting. No type is easier or harder to be as your core type, although it feels like it sometimes. They're just different. Each one has a distinct, habitual, automatic, unconscious pattern of thinking, feeling, and acting. And this is where the tie to IFS comes in, because the parts do fall into categories here. A couple of little points. One is that depending on what Enneagram books or articles you're looking at, you'll see the types have different names, and that isn't really super important. They're just really identifiers. The other thing that sometimes comes up is, do the numbers mean anything? Is a 1 better than an 8? And they don't. They're just all identifiers. So let's keep that there. Each type, though, and this is why I did the attentional practice I did, each type has a very specific primary focus of attention. In other words, a group or a subject on which they focus habitually and mostly unconsciously. And that focus of attention is what's going to drive this pattern of habitual, automatic thinking, feeling, and acting. So that primary focus of attention is absolutely key to this. And it's an issue or a perspective that the type is going to prioritize over all other information. The way that I usually explain this is as if you think about how much information is coming at you in any moment, whether it's through any of your senses or in any way, it's way more than any of us can possibly factor in or notice or take advantage of. And what the type map shows us, the Enneagram type map, is a snapshot of which of that information is getting highlighted, which is getting ignored, and which might be hitting our senses and getting magnified, which might get minimized, and like that. And that's nice to know that there is a map of how we're being limited, because if we know where those limitations are, we can begin to do this and open that window. And that's why all of this is so important. So I hope I made that clear. There was one question that I noticed in the chat about type changing. And I'll just throw in here to answer it. It is very, very, very unlikely, and I personally do not believe that core type changes over time. Trauma, however, can cause us to seem to move into one of our connected points. When you look at, let's go to the next slide so that I can demonstrate this. If you look at this map, you're going to see that each type has 2 lines running from it. I'll use myself as an example. I'm a 9 at the top there. I have a line that goes to 3 and a line that goes to 6. Those lines mean that I have access to the qualities of those types. Sometimes we've seen that trauma will push an individual from their core type, in my case 9, into one of those connected points. And after a significant amounts of unlayering and unblending and unburdening, we might find that the core type is underneath. This raises another question or another point that I like to make. And that is that sometimes people will find their type really quickly and really easily. And a lot of people will not. And both are absolutely normal and don't really mean anything about your level of development or your structure or anything like that. It's just different. I've been in professional Enneagram conferences where all of a sudden someone who believed they were a type whatever discovered after unlayering something else that the core was actually something different. So it is a continuous learning process. And here's your diagram. And again, if you know your type, you're going to see that you have lines to two other types. Those are called connected points. And there's some other information beyond that, but okay. And the types on either side around the circle are called wings. Now, again, using myself as an example, I'm a 9. It means that I have a wing in 8 and a wing in 1. Some Enneagram teachers will tell you that you only have one wing. That's fine. I personally don't believe it, mostly because of the way that I was taught and what I've found in myself. What I think is actually more likely is that one wing is much more predominant and familiar to us. In my case, it happens to be 8, and I can explain that through family history and everything else. But when I work long and hard enough, I have found that one wing inside. It does, in my case, tend to be more interior. And in many of my students and my clients, I've found that that balance happens. One is predominant and visible, the other is really interior. But I would like you to consider the possibility that you have both wings, just because this is a holistic system. And ultimately, we want to find the parts of all 9 types in ourselves if we can. And so the names are here. They're written on the handout if you want to print that out. Some people like to print the handout because they make notes next to each type as they go. That's why we did this way. So I'm going to pause here and see if we've got questions.
Yeah, put questions in there. And Joan, can I say something?
Of course.
I'm going to try to remember the 2 things I want to say. One is that somebody said, no, I'm like, where did I hear this? Okay, I was actually interviewed on another podcast, and we were talking about IFS, and we started talking about the Enneagram. And the girls that were interviewing me told me that they heard that when we're self, we're all 9 types. And then they also said, like, if we're kind of like healthy, then we're no longer a type. Like, so the idea that like I could be healthy and then I would no longer be a 3. And I was like, I don't think that's right.
Well, I think that there are instances and short periods of time where that could be true of all of us. That we have instances where we are enough in self, or self energy is strong enough in us that type has, my language would be, type has relaxed to the point where it's not really impacting us. I don't believe that it ever goes away. It's kind of like the old argument about the ego. You actually don't want to get rid of it. You don't want to get rid of your type because it also has a lot of positives. We tend to focus on the obstructions. But there's a lot of positives embedded. I mean, all of my intuition and all of that is firmly embedded in my 9-ness. I don't want to let that go. Yeah. I would prefer that some of the negative parts of 9 didn't control me so much, and that's why I'm doing parts work with it. Yeah. But I don't think it ever goes away. And actually, it fits here. This somebody put in the chat. Sylvia put in the chat, thank you. I have a part that doesn't like to be put in a box. And actually, 20 years ago, we made a video for PBS about the Enneagram, and we called it Getting Out of the Box. And the idea is that we are in a box already, but we can't see it. It's invisible. And by doing the Enneagram work, and I'm going to add doing the IFS parts work, we're slowly taking those pieces of the box that constrict us and opening them up. The other thing I'll say here is that one of the reasons that the Enneagram is not a quick learn, because it's not, and anybody who tells you it is, I would take great issue with, is that if you look at this diagram, you have a core type, you have 2 connected points, and you have 2 wings. That's 5 out of 9. That's complicated. And they are really, really interconnected. There's another question here. Did you name the types to correspond to a manager part? No. The names I use are the Palmer-Daniels names that go back to the 70s and the earliest books that Helen Palmer wrote. Other authors use other names. I think it's an interesting point, though, that we could look at some of these names, which actually are descriptive of the worldview, and see if we could look for manager parts that might identify that way. I think that's a great suggestion. Thank you so much.
The other thing I was going to ask, and then, what does epicure mean? For 7.
Yeah, we've got a little bit of old language still in here. Epicure means someone who wants to experience and savor all the best that life has to offer. Usually we think about it in terms of food. It doesn't mean that. Some of the other authors use other names for 7 than epicure. It might help you. Adventurer is one of the names. Innovator is another name I've seen. It means somebody that has a very broad view and a very big interest in everything that's new. So I hope that helps.
Yeah, someone put enthusiast is the 7. 7s
Yes,
are like so fun-loving.
Yeah, there are lots and lots of names. There's another question here. Besides the 5 that are directly, I would say also that 9 points are in each of us. Yes, but you have to start somewhere. And the way I learned it was you start by finding your core and your connected points, which will lead you to your wings. And as you progress, hopefully, to the other 4. There are also some other ways of looking at this and some other groupings that we can do, but that's beyond the scope of what we're teaching today. Let me just go a little further here. The other names for 4 besides romantic are artist, creative person. Those are the ones that come up to mind most quickly.
What about the idea? I'm sorry, Joan.
Let me just look. Would protectors present as a different type making? I don't believe so. I think that protectors could maybe take on those perspectives, but I don't think that they would present as another type. It's an interesting question that we could look at. There's another one. Types lean towards behaving like other types when they're moving towards growth, and healthy or unhealthy. This is a theory which has, over the last recent number of years, begun to lose favor. It doesn't, the idea of healthy or unhealthy and moving towards health in another point, another type, or away from health in another type is not really how it works. The way that I originally learned it is that one type is what we used to call your stress point. And what is true in most people is that it's most likely that you'll see the qualities of that type when you're under a lot of stress. When you're under a lot of stress. It's not the only time you can see it, but when you're beginning to learn this, it's most likely you'd see it in stress. And the other type is sometimes called the security point or the heart point. And originally, again, we thought that you'd see it most in a situation where you were really comfortable and feeling really safe. And again, as a first cut, I think that that's probably true. There's one big caveat to that, and that is that in our language, at least in American culture or Western culture, we associate stress with bad or unhealthy, and we associate heart or security with positive or good. And that would lead to the assumption that if you move to your stress point, you'd go to the lower qualities of it. And I can tell you categorically that that is not true. Similarly, just because you're moving to your heart point doesn't mean you're going to the good qualities at that point. So again, I'll use myself as an example. My stress point is 6. That's often a really good place for a sometimes fuzzy 9 like me to go, because it brings in a lot of logic and a lot of analysis that I don't naturally have. Now, I would prefer not to go there in a stressful situation, but that's how I learned that it was there. And on the other hand, my security point or my heart point in my example happens to be 3. And I can tell you that sometimes I fall into the less wonderful aspects of 3, which has to do with blocking emotions and some other things like that, even though sometimes I get there from a secure place. So I hope I answered that. I see a question about the survey, and let me just say this. I am not a proponent of any of the surveys except as a starting point. And the reason is that I've been doing this for a very, very long time. And I found so many people that were mistyped by taking just a forced choice test. It can be helpful to get you oriented to the map as a whole, but please keep an open mind about it and try to find somebody who can interview you to really help you go more deeply into the type. So don't take those tests for more than a starting point. All right, I'm gonna let some of these questions sit here for now and go a little further into what the Enneagram is and how. And the one thing I will say is the last question I see here is there an objective assessment tool? No. There are lots of tools, and one of them happens to be mine, but there are lots of others that will, as I just said, help you to get on the map and help you to find some starting points. And then somebody here just made a good suggestion. First used one of the tests and then went to the Daniels narrative assessment to try to confirm. I think the more you study and the more you go into it, the more you're going to see about it. My orientation is Palmer Daniels. I use David Daniels' book, The Essential Enneagram. I've been using it since he wrote it. And I do most of my typing work by interview. That's how I was trained. And I think that that really is the most reliable way to do it. So let's go to the next slide, if we can. I think we went backwards. Let's go the other way.
I think that is the next slide is questions.
I did that one. Oh,
yeah.
Of intelligence.
Yeah. Okay, I think, can we just pause for just 1 second?
Yeah.
Okay. Is there anything for people that are new to the Enneagram? Is there anything that you would say on like how, so we talked about like how people can find out their type, right? So people that are on right now, like listening and watching, is there any way they can know about, like what would help them know about their type?
Yeah, actually, I was just looking at that, and some of the people in the room have made some great suggestions.
Okay.
David Daniels' book, The Essential Enneagram, has a paragraph test in it. Jerry Wagner's book, The Enneagram Spectrum, has a test in it. That's a starting point. The Rizzo Hudson Type Indicator is online. That's a starting point. And there are others. Those are probably the 3 most reliable and most researched. The other thing that is been put in the chat, which I really think is key, is you can watch panels of types. What that is a group of people who know their type being interviewed about what it's like to be that type. And that's really helpful because you're seeing somebody talking about their internal experience. I'm actually taught that no matter how much of an expert I am, and I completely believe this, it's the inside out knowledge of the individual I'm talking to that governs, not my expert opinion. And I think that fits really, really well with IFS. And it's actually how I got by that I don't want to be put in a box piece, that I had to find it myself. So the narrative Enneagram, somebody just put, is a website where you can see panels. You can also go and click on a type and see somebody talking about their internal experience. And I find that really, really helpful. So those are exactly the kind of things that I would do. The International Enneagram Association has a website, and that will show you a very broad array of different styles. But for our purposes and for what Tammy and I are doing, we're working with the narrative tradition style, which means we interview people, we have them find their parts, and we facilitate their finding where their parts and their type might intersect. That's how we see this. And that's super
Well, I think it
to us. Go ahead.
I was going to say, I think as we keep going, we're going to talk about that a little bit more, about like the words you use and the centers and all that stuff. So I think just sort of stay tuned. We have more.
We have a lot more.
We have a lot more. The other thing I want to say is that I think that you're your type when you read it and you're like, that is so annoying. I hate that. And you're like, that's probably your type.
Yeah, or when it makes you slightly nauseous is another. It's kind of like when you find a part that you really don't want to know you have. It comes out that way.
You're like, that's the part that drives your bus all the time.
Okay, so let me go back to our basic information here. And as I said, we're going to make all of these slides available. And I appreciate all this information, but a lot of people who are on this call don't know the Enneagram, so I want to make sure that we cover that piece. So here are some basic principles. Like I said before, focus of attention is habitually and unconsciously limited by the type. Whatever you read, whichever author you read, see how they state the focus of attention. It's going to be the same across all authors. And really concentrate on trying to find that in yourself. If everything else about the type descriptions that you find across the board fits a type, and the focus of attention is wrong, I guarantee you that you're in the wrong place. And I'm very hesitant to guarantee, because I have a lot of slips in me. But if the focus of attention is not there, then we really have to look. As I said before, what I think I'm communicating is often very different than what I'm actually communicating or what the other person is experiencing. And emotional reactivity based on past experience often underlies our ideas and our actions, but a lot of this can be managed by shifting our attention. And this is, again, the crossover to mindfulness and the crossover to IFS work. Basic principles for using IFS. You all should know these. Absolutely key. Self is ever present and unchangeable and non-reactive. And all parts are always welcome. And the Enneagram corollary to that is that every type has higher qualities and gifts. And those gifts are ever present. They just get covered up. And in our hypothesis, in large part, they're being covered up by parts. And if we can work to remove them, then we can free those higher qualities, which in many instances are qualities of self. Okay, next slide. And this one. Okay.
Joan.
Yes.
I can hear, even though my stupid camera keeps doing that, I can hear you fine. Can I say one thing about that? I think we have to go back one. I think the slide, go back one. Yeah.
Oh yeah, we missed one.
Nope.
I'm sorry. And
that's going, there we go, right there. The other thing, I think the thing in IFS terms would be unblending, right? So you don't know, when you're in a part, you don't know you're in a part, right? So that's the same thing as like, if I'm in my type, then I don't necessarily know that I'm in my type. So when I'm like one time, Joan, do you remember this? When I was like, I don't remember what I was upset about, but I was upset about something. And then I decided to put the podcast on YouTube, and I got like I was like putting the podcast on YouTube, and I was all crazy. And I talked to you right after, and I was telling you why I was upset about something. And I didn't realize that I was like, this thing had happened like an hour before that. And I was actually really upset by that. But all I could focus on was I needed to get the podcast on YouTube. And I just was like, so I was so blended with that part, and I was so in my type that's the unconscious. That's where both of the systems come together really nice, where I'm so blended with the part that I don't even realize it, or I'm so like the unconscious is so there, or the habit is so there that I don't even realize that I'm in the type. And we're saying the same thing.
Exactly. That's
Okay.
exactly right. And it was a great experience that day.
Do you remember that?
No, yeah, I do, because we were putting together two different systems and using them really,
Yeah.
really well.
Yeah.
Okay, so again, our thesis is that using the Enneagram can be a comprehensive way to improve your capacity to self-observe and to name and transform patterns. Using it together with IFS similarly makes the same learning easier and in some ways more understandable and more accessible, is my experience. So when you put them together, we get a deeper understanding of ourselves. Understanding the basics of the Enneagram can, I think, provide a doorway into increasing self-energy. What I mean by that is to say that if you know what your primary type is, and I'll use Tammy's as an example. Tammy's a 3. The higher quality in the 3 is honesty. And if she knows that that's there, and she can work actively with her parts to relax the type, the Enneagram type, which is my language, then she's making the space, the same way we do in IFS, for that honesty, which is naturally a part of her, to make itself seen. Now, you can't reach for it the same way you can't reach for self-energy, but you can make the space for it to come in. And that's what we're talking about here. If I can, we have a lot about 9 going on in the chat. If I can relax the parts of my 9 that want to get confused and want to get scared and all of that stuff, and the fog rolls in on the 9, if I can relax that enough to let the non-judgment and the universal love that is the center of my 9 type come in, not only am I a lot happier, but everybody around me is a lot happier. And that's my access to self-energy. Okay? So it goes in both directions. At least that's how we're looking at it.
Yeah, beautifully, actually.
Okay, let's go to the next slide. Okay, so one of the ways to look at the Enneagram when you first learn it is to understand that it's 9 types broken into 3 groups of 3. And they're broken into those groups by common concerns and some common actually behaviors that you might see. In Western cultures, it's generally thought that really the energy and the intelligence of the head and thinking is the only one that we really lean on. And most of us, I mean, I went to law school, are certainly trained that that's where you focus. And it turns out that, yes, we've been trained this way, but there's intelligence in the head, and I'm sure I'm not telling most of you something you don't already know. There's tremendous intelligence in the heart, and there's tremendous intelligence in the gut or in the belly. And the Enneagram types are broken into 3 groups around those 3 intelligences. Now, it doesn't mean that if you happen to be a head type, as we would call it, that you don't have the other 2. Or if you happen to be a gut type that you don't think. It just means that you might be a little out of balance in how much impact that center of intelligence has on you day to day. So we usually want to look at, where is that center? Some people actually can find their center before they can find their type. And the other way we can think about it is that the head type is thoughts, the heart type is emotion or emotional intelligence, and the gut type is gut instinct or instinct and sensation. So we've divided the types this way. And what I want to do is I want to try to give you a very silly little experience of doing this. Again, something that I learned from a dear friend many years ago. So let's go to the next slide and you'll see how silly this is once I get there. Okay, so what I want to do, if you're willing, and hopefully most of you are by yourself, so you don't have to worry about looking silly. Believe me, I've done this in rooms with 100 people and they really get embarrassed. I want you to stand up, and like the binoculars, I want you to make 2 circles out of your hands and put them over your eyes. And I want you to just take a spin around your living room and see what it feels like to have your vision limited and your intake of information limited by these circles around your eyes, as if you were looking through the wrong side of binoculars. So just do that and walk around for a couple minutes, because that's sort of what it feels like to be a head center type. And I'll explain which ones those are, but let's just do that first, okay? So I'm not getting out of my chair because I've got myself in the right place on this screen and I don't want to mess it up. But that's what we're doing. And see, how does it limit you? How does it help you? There's a positive to this too, okay? Now shake that off and take a couple of breaths. And the second one is put your hands over your heart. And I would right over the center of your chest. And think about interacting with your room or anybody that's in it, with your focus coming from your heart space. Your focus is coming from there rather than from your head. And you're walking around and you're interacting with your environment, leading from that emotional core. And again, we all have all 3 of these. Some of them are more familiar than others, but let's just see how that feels. Just a little bit. Okay, and I know I'm going really fast, but I'm going to do this anyway. Shake that one off. And again, we're standing. Put your hands on your gut, below your navel, or on your hara. And it helps with this one to put one hand on the front of you and one hand on the back, so that you really center your attention down in your belly. And you think about being rooted to the floor. And walk around with your attention centered from that space and see what that feels like. Now, personally, I love that because that's my center. But a lot of people are going to go, oh, why did she have me do that? But let's just see how it is for you. And when you finish doing that, make a couple of notes about those 3 placements, because they're really placements of attention that I asked you to do. And when you get a chance, let's see in the chat a little bit of response to what that felt like. Next slide, please. There are some questions there. But which was the strongest or the most familiar? Which was the least? Oh, I'm glad you liked it. Heart felt best, head second, yeah. Got head, heart. Okay, make sure you write these down because this is really useful information. Heart felt like home to me. I've heard that before.
That's beautiful.
Yeah, heart strong. The other 2 felt limiting. That's really interesting. Thoughts and emotions were easier. Sensations, I struggled. This is all really, really good information.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. Like the tearing up. I mean, that tells you, right? Like that's good information right there.
Curious, head more focused, gut more sad. Interesting. Binocular, very unfamiliar. Head, heart felt best. This is really, really good. And take a look through the chat and see what the others in the class are giving us. As I said, there are really simple ways sometimes to screen for this. And I have to thank my dear friend, Deborah Olson, who taught me this exercise a very long time ago. And I would love to do it in person in a room with all of you sometimes because it's really fun. So the second question is, with these reactions, what parts do you think might be active? And again, I'm not going to ask you to share that, but make some notes. Did you notice a protector, a manager, or a firefighter? Did you maybe notice an exile? There's been some in the chat about shame. Did shame come into this? Oops, somebody said like imminent monsters. Interesting.
Yeah.
So there's one. But what parts might be active in these different placements and placement of attention?
Yeah. Yeah, and you would just notice that by noticing those feelings in your body, right? Like that idea that I put this here, and all of a sudden I have a sense of being limited. Like, how did you notice that being limited? Like, was it a thought? Was it a sensation? Was it a feeling? Like, how did you notice that? I think that's other really fantastic information, is sort of where the part is coming from and what the part's telling you, like what the part's communicating. It's really great.
I love this from Melissa. My manager 5 wing is more head centric, but even she's uncomfortable being that way. She likes observing without obsessing. That's fabulous.
That's so good.
Head focused, but felt less like me. Heart loving, warm feeling. Gut. So again, all of these things are holistic. And a lot of what we're doing here, both in IFS and the Enneagram, is trying to get to some balance. So one of the ways to look at these 3 centers is, if I know that I am more often and more comfortable in one of the 3, I can get really curious about how I could expand my ability to experience the other 2. And I can tell you again, in my case, doing a lot of heart work was really helpful because it was really unfamiliar. Okay. And I'm sure that there were lots of types in there, parts in there, but at that time I didn't have that language.
I felt like the heart, felt really good. And I thought, yeah, that feels really comfortable leading for my heart. The binoculars felt kind of weird, but then the heart felt really good. But when I did the gut, I could felt myself completely settle down. And I was like, wow, that's interesting.
There is quite a bit of theory that, and Helen Palmer would agree with a lot of this, that if you can get your attention into your gut, down into your belly, that there is a more neutral place that we will all experience if we're looking out with a placement of attention down in the gut. And that, of course, is completely consistent with martial arts. There are actually a number of Enneagram teachers who've gone into martial arts to learn the gut center when they're different types. I know of several 6s or head types who are very experienced martial arts practitioners now, and they did it to learn balance. I also know some heart types, some 2s who did martial arts to learn some balance.
Yeah.
So all of those are important pieces. Okay, let's go to the next slide, and I'll go back to Tammy.
Oh, right. Okay. Yeah, I mean, I think this is just what we're saying. Okay, so this is how parts would communicate to us. So I would focus on sort of what you have written down and what you're noticing already. So the head, like you might notice if you notice something like your head saying, I don't understand why we're doing this. So we want you to notice what kind of felt stronger. Like, did you feel it more in your head, more in your heart, or more in your gut? So here's some examples of what that might have felt like or might have been like for you. So the head could have been like, I don't understand why we're doing this. It could have been sort of a lot of chatter in your head, a lot of thoughts, a lot of energy up here. The heart could have been more like a feeling, like I'm noticing that I'm bored, I'm tired, I'm lonely. There could be some feelings up in your heart. And in the gut might have felt like I'm uncomfortable sitting in this chair. I've been sitting in this chair too long, or even getting up out of the chair, walking around. Like, what was your body feeling like? And so those might have been examples of what you're noticing during the exercise. I feel like you guys are already doing this, like you're already saying it, but if you want to continue to write stuff in the chat, this is really helpful for you, and it's helpful for other people too. So if you know your number and you say, okay, I noticed that I felt so much better in my head and I'm a 6. So then other people might be like, oh, okay, well, I was in my head too. I wonder if I'm a 6. So it's really helpful. Again, that's part of the narrative tradition, if I'm getting this right, Joan, of like, right? Of like, I'm sharing what my experience is like. And that's just not for me to talk about me because I'm a 3 and I love talking about myself, but it's also because it also will help you as a 3 or a 4, like, or a 2, like maybe learn about, like, so as I share my experience, it helps other types understand their experience more
That's
deeply.
exactly. That's why we call it the narrative tradition, and why I said before that it's the type speaking for themselves. I had an experience recently that was really challenging to this idea. I had somebody in one of my classes who had identified herself as a particular type, and it just didn't feel right to me. And it just didn't feel right, and it didn't feel right. And my teacher part, and maybe my lawyer part, wanted to say, I can go convince her. I can show her that she's not this, she's that. And I really had to work with those parts to get them to slow down, to get them to quiet down, to get them to realize that that was not going to help her. And that the only way that I could be of any help for her was just to keep reflecting back what I saw. And sometimes people get it and sometimes they don't. But you know what? We have to take them where they are. And she's in the conversation about it, and that's good. But it is true that the more people you hear describe their type experience from the inside out, the more you're going to learn about those types. The way I learned the Enneagram content was by interviewing and interviewing and interviewing and taking notes and then reviewing. And it created, a big bank of information.
I think the other thing that's important is that this is how parts might use this to speak to us. So then we know, okay, so if there's a part that I put the binoculars on and all of a sudden I felt this fear, okay, well, I want to be curious about the part of me that felt that way. Like, it's a really fantastic part, like identifying parts exercise, right? Like, does that make sense? So then, or the idea of like, I hate being a 3. Okay, well, there's a part of me that hates being a 3. Let me go to that part. Let me get to know that part. So yeah. Doing this, what we're doing right now, is great for Enneagram, and it's so fun, and I love it. It's so interesting, but it's also gonna help you begin to map out your parts and then get to know your parts. And then doing the exercise we just did, it teaches you it's gonna help you understand the 3 centers, and it's gonna help you understand where you are on the Enneagram diagram, but it's also gonna understand how your parts might be communicating with you, like as you go throughout the world. Like, if you know, okay, I know that I have more connection to my heart, then I know that that's how my parts might use that to speak to me. Does that make sense?
It makes perfect sense.
I have a part that has to ask Joan, is that right?
She's learning not to do that. There's something in the chat that I really want to respond to, and that is Marilyn is saying, the problem I had with gut was that I wasn't sure I was putting my hand on my back in the right place. Yeah, that could be a one clue, but let's hold that lightly and see. Perfectionist ones do really like to know that they're following the rules, but again, hold it lightly. Let's see if we can go there. Okay, let's go to the next slide. And I think we covered this. So by now, I hope, if you don't know your type, that you're beginning to have an idea of some types you might be. Another way to do this, as Tammy said before, is to make some notes about types that you have a strong reaction to, positively or negatively. And then to begin to think about what parts might be involved. And I know that we're being repetitive, but this is one of those things where we have to keep reminding ourselves, at least I do, what the questions are. So from here, I am going to go to describing the types to you.
Do we want to do questions?
Yeah, let's go to the next slide, which is questions, and see if we have. I'm just watching the time,
Okay.
but we'll take a few questions. I don't know whether any questions have come through the Q&A. Let me take a look.
I've looked, but Sarah, I don't know if you can.
Right,
oh, here we go.
Right there, I see one clarifying question about wings, because this really confuses my parts. If I'm an 8, then are my wings the 2 and the 5? No. If you're an 8, your connected points, as I said before, your stress or your heart points are 2 and 5. Those are your connected points, the lines in the diagram. Your wings are 7 and 9, the ones along the circle next to you, your neighbors. The difference between connected points and wings is pretty significant, and I don't want to go too far into it, but let's just say that the wings, the ones around the circle next to you, are more kind of giving a flavor to the way that you express your type 8-ness. So if you're leaning a little more to 7, or that's the dominant one, you're going to show a little bit more of that 7 curiosity and high energy and that kind of stuff. If you lean more to 9, you might be a little quieter, a little more settled, a little less. Now, as I said before, you have both, but at the beginning, especially, one's going to be likely more predominant. The connected points are more types where you can train yourself to access qualities. So I hope that answered. What are we getting in the chat?
We're good. We're just talking about the handouts and the.
Okay.
Yeah. Does anybody want to put any chats up about? And then we're gonna talk more about. Can you guys hear me? Even though my video is frozen.
Yeah.
We're gonna talk. Okay, we're gonna talk more about the types in the centers and do more of a deep dive into each type. That's gonna happen next.
That's next. Okay, so I need more water.
Joan, you're doing an amazing job.
Thank you. I try. Okay, so if you have downloaded the handout, which looks like this with my chicken scratch names, you can write next to the types. You'll also notice that there's arrows on the diagram that are not on the ones in the PowerPoint. Let's go to the next slide.
Go to the next slide. Yeah, sorry.
Okay. So I'm going to quickly go through the types for you. And I'm going to give you a little bit, but not a lot. And I'm going to do what I said before. Thank you to Joanna, and thank you everybody else. I'm going to highlight, sorry, I just lost my train. I'm going to highlight the focus of attention because, as I said to you before, this is really key. Well, let's start on the right with the heart or emotional types. And this is type 2, type 3, and type 4. So if you look at the diagram, you're going to see that there's an equilateral triangle in the center, and then the other points are around it. And that's interesting and important because the points that hit that equilateral triangle are the core points of each triad. So in the heart emotional triad, the 3 is the core of the emotional triad. In the head or mental, the 6 in the center there is the core. And in the body gut type, the 9 is the core. The reason that this is interesting and important is because there's a lot of commonality between the types in each of these 3 groupings. And it does kind of all emanate from the one in the center. So just to know that, it's also something you'll see in the literature, that the core of the triad, we call these groups of 3 triads, is such and such. So if I start with 3, and if I'm teaching a narrative workshop, I almost always start with 3 because in Western culture, this is the type that most people can identify with most easily. And since we have Tammy, a live exemplar of 3, we're lucky. Because a lot of times the 3s are too busy to come to workshops. Well,
that's true.
Focus of attention for the type 3 is tasks and goals. And when they're on task, you want to stay out of their way because they set the goal, they set the task list, and they're off. Now, that's really interesting because it makes them really productive, really valued in our society, really successful, and really admired. So why would they want to take any of that apart? And why would they want to work on this? I mean, what's to change? What's not to like? And the reason is that underneath all of this is a very deep connection to emotions. This is a heart type after all. And the doing and the tasks and the goals is a way to protect themselves in large part from having to feel those emotions. So the very young child, 3, and we don't type children except by looking backwards, at least I don't. The very young or child 3, or even the college student 3, is going to be looking at success, is probably going to be ambitious, is going to set tasks and goals, and is going to be probably quite accomplished, although not always. And they're also going to be somewhat disconnected from those emotions because when they were very young, those emotions were overwhelming. So using our hypothesis about parts, almost every 3 I've ever met has a whole bunch of parts that get in the way of their feeling their emotions and say to the 3 things like, oh, keep going, stay on task, get that, get that next accolade, get that next award, because that's going to keep you away from feeling. And it's almost always there. And the reason that we want to work with it is that it is a partial interaction with the world for them because they have a deep capacity for empathy. They have a deep capacity for emotion. And we don't want anybody running from fear. And there are 3s who aren't afraid of emotion that will tell you that they just don't like it, it's uncomfortable and all of that. But if we go deep enough, I think we're going to find that this is underneath. Now, the other thing that happens here is that the 3s are the people in the world who think that their value comes from their being doers. Enneagram shorthand or jargon is human doings, not human beings. Not nice, but sometimes accurate. So let's say you have a 3 in your life, like I have Tammy in mine. When she gets into a flurry, like she just told you about something, I want to try to comfort her by slowing her down a little bit and finding out if something happened that really is upsetting her that maybe she could work with or I could help her work with to calm her down. Because if she keeps running full steam, she's going to accomplish a lot, but she's never going to get at that underlying piece. So the 3 is task and goal and efficient and organized usually, and very quick. Efficiency is a very key word here. And again, I'm doing this very short form, so I'm leaving out a whole lot of stuff, and I realize that, but it's the only way I can get this in the time allotted. So just know that underneath all that activity and all that stuff that we love them for, there is a deep feeling being who we really want just to be with us instead of doing things for us. Okay? Now, if I move to just up 1 to the 2, by the way, we call the 3 in my school the performer, because there's an ability to sort of shapeshift a little bit to adjust to what's needed for the task at hand. If I move just to the type next door, which is a 2, this is also an emotional or heart type. This one is somebody who is usually much more connected to the idea that they are very, very emotional. They won't necessarily express that emotion. And sometimes they'll tell you that they're very, very careful about it. But they know that they have the capacity for emotion. And 3s at the beginning often don't. So the 2, which we call the giver, or some schools call the helper, is the person who takes pride in being the most useful, helpful helpmate. Help keeps coming up, and I know I'm being repetitive. And they see themselves almost as an adjunct to the rest of us. So this is like the power behind the throne, or the admin person who actually runs the company, because they want to be behind and they just but they want to be acknowledged for how much they have, but they don't want to be out front. Now, that doesn't mean that we don't have 2s who like to be the center of attention. We do, but usually it's for reflections of how helpful they've been to somebody else. So if you have a 2 in your life, they are constantly focusing on you and on what you may need. And the problem here is that they very often, in service of that, will neglect themselves and their own needs. So I'll give you another example. I have a dear friend who's a 2, who is in her early 80s now, who is just now learning what happens when you don't take care of yourself and you give everything to someone else. So this is why we want more balance in a 2. Where I said that the 3 identifies themselves with what they accomplish, the 2 identifies themselves with what they can do for other people. Now, there's an interesting talent in here where the 3 can see how to accomplish almost anything. The 2 can look at somebody and very quickly see the potential in that person and come up with a plan of how to bring it out. Now, whether that person wants them to or not sometimes is problematic, but they can see it, and that's always a talent that we see. So the focus of attention is called other people's needs. They walk through the world looking excuse me, for needs to meet, okay? If I go to the other side, I go to 4, which is the 3rd of the emotional types. And I'm going to stop after this triad, okay? The 4, when I first learned this, was, and you'll excuse me, referred to as the tragic romantic, because many 4s, although not all, have a dramatic streak. And when I was first in Enneagram training, the first 4s that I ever met had that dramatic streak in spades, just all over the place. So I kind of learned that all 4s were dramatic, but they're not. Sometimes it's internal. There are introverts and extroverts of every type. So the center of everything for a 4, the focus of attention, if you happen to be a 4, and you're probably very creative and you know that you're very emotional, is interesting. It's what's missing in any given situation. They're less concerned, and they will have a lot of resistance to what they actually have or what's actually in front of them, and are much more interested in what is not there. This can create a problem because it can make them almost chronically dissatisfied. And it's sitting on experiences, childhood experiences, usually of feeling left out or being a misfit or being misunderstood. Misunderstood is a big word in 4. So they have a huge emotional range usually. Many 4s will tell you that they can experience higher highs and lower lows than anybody, and I don't doubt that. The problem is that sometimes they're so into those emotions that they get magnified in either direction. So we want to work with the parts, again, to come to balance. And interestingly, one of the higher qualities of 4 is equanimity, which means balance. So this is the reason that we want to loosen the type structure around them. But you'll find many creatives here. They do tend to look at the past rather than the future. They're not much on the future. Longing, as just popped up in the chat. I love how that happens. If I drop something, it shows up in the chat. Longing can control them. And when they learn to manage it, when they can work with those parts, it can be very freeing. And I can tell you from what I've seen that it frees up even better levels of creativity in many people. So that's the heart triad. And we've got a lot in the chat, and I wasn't really reading it. I just picked out a few things. I'm going to stop just for a couple minutes and see if there are particular questions about 2, 3, or 4.
And why people are thinking
I'm likely a 4 and not thrilled. There's a lot of good there. I have barking. I will be right
That's okay. That's okay. I think we want to go to the next slide though, so that the next slide is the 2, 3, and 4. Yeah. So
yeah.
Do you want to deal with Rosie?
Yeah, let's
No,
go.
you're fine, Joan. You're amazing. Do you want to deal with that? You don't have to.
Yeah, let me do this. So this was, I forgot we did this.
It's okay.
Here's the shared concerns that I was talking about that ties this triad together. And don't forget that the 3 has wings in 4 and 2. So if you're 3, you want to look at all 3 of these. They all tend to be very sensitive to emotions, and they all have a good connection to the intelligence of the heart center. Key issues here are image, how I'm perceived by other, connections, especially for 2s and 4s, approval of others, especially for 2s and 3s, being recognized, empathy being a key, and feeling. Well, you will find many 2s and 4s in helping professions. We have a lot of therapists, we have a lot of coaches, because that empathy, and somebody just said in the chat, and I agree, you can hold space for almost anything. They are attuned to issues of image. I said before that the 3 can shapeshift a little bit for the task or the goal at hand. The 2 can shapeshift a little bit for the needs of the person that they're focused on. It's just natural. You'd have to, if you were a 2 or a 3, you'd have to look for it to see, probably. And each triad has what we call an underlying energetic driver, or the fuel that keeps this whole thing in place. And with the heart triad, there's been a little disagreement over the years, but we've come to think that there's some connection to grief underneath. That's probably the best word that I can say for what's holding this pattern in place. So grief work, trauma work, unburdening work is going to be particularly helpful here. And I see again that the chat, let me just get one thing, is okay. Somebody gave me the other keyword for 4 that I dropped. Thank you. Authenticity. 4s will sniff out inauthentic faster than anybody I've ever seen. They just know that it's there. So there we go. Go ahead, Tam.
So I just wanted to tie in IFS there, because that's where your exiles are going to be. So one of the things that, do I say this now, Joan? I think I do. Mm-hmm. Is that one of the things that Joan and I think, one of our hypotheses is that there's going to be some common themes in your exiles depending on what your type is. So I think here is a really good, like, sort of, you can really see, like, this is all describing the types, but what we're going to see here is this is also going to describe your protector, so your protector energy, and the protector parts that you have are going to be around this, right? So I have a lot of protectors around doing and achieving and being productive and all that stuff. And then this is going to give me some clues to what my exiles are, the burdens my exiles are carrying. So it's going to be burdens around loss and grief. And there's a lot of burdens for me around being seen in a really kind of interesting way. So I think that's something that we're really curious about, that idea that I'm repeating myself, but so the managers.
You're absolutely right. And this is why we keep using the phrase that the Enneagram can be a map to find your parts. This is exactly what we mean. And I appreciate how you fleshed that out, Tim. That's exactly what we
Thanks, Joan. A part of me likes to hear that.
Oh, good. Can we go to the next slide, please? Okay, so the mental types, these are the ones on the left side of the diagram, and they're centered around type 6. Mental types lead with their minds. So these 3 types are highly reliant on mental skills. Now, like I said before, all of us educated in the West tend to have an outside appreciation for mental capacity and mental flexibility. So you have to take that layer off first to look at this. Analysis and logic is natural to them if you're a 5, a 6, or a 7, where it's not natural to me, despite all of my education. This is where they go to really figure out when there's something really important. So what this leads to is a key issue around making things predictable and secure. And it starts in the 6, where the driver for the 6, and I'll talk about the underlying fuel, but the driver for the 6 is certainty. So the 6 profile, and the 6 has been called lots of things over time. Right now we're using loyal skeptic, which is pretty good. When I originally learned this, we said devil's advocate, which is still my favorite because I think it's more evocative. At one point, we were talking about them as troopers because they're loyal. There's a number of words. But for these purposes, let's say loyal skeptic, because almost always in 6s, we can find skepticism. They tend to have thinking patterns that go around issues of doubt and anxiety. This is 6s I'm speaking with. 6s can, and somebody just put this in the chat, can be very difficult to work with because it's difficult for them to work with themselves. Not harder than other types, but there's a problem in here because if you're constantly doubting, and you're doubting, you get to a place where you agree on something and then you take it apart and you doubt it again, it creates a really difficult path. The other, sorry.
It's okay.
Yeah. The other problem here is there's 2 separate presentations of 6. And every 6 I've ever met, and that's a lot of people, has both of these. And you can use fight or flight as a metaphor here. So we have what in the Enneagram community we call phobic 6s, which are the flight ones. And we have what we call counterphobic 6s, which are the fight ones. So the flight ones are, I'm getting out of here before I get hurt. And the fight ones are, I'm going to get it before it gets me. Now, like I said, every 6 I've ever met has both, but one usually predominates. And usually it's to a pretty significant extent. So this makes it even more difficult. If you have somebody who's primarily a fight 6, a counterphobic 6, you're going to have a hell of a time because it's going to all be about proving everything and every detail until you can get them to settle down enough of their parts and bring in enough self-energy to really get some clarity that's coming from somewhere other than here. So this is where that balance between head and gut is so important. You will never out-logic a head type. You will never out-analyze a head type. And you really want them on your teams. You want a 6 on your teams because they're not, because they're going to see trouble before anybody else. Now, unfortunately, sometimes they're going to stay on it, even when everybody else has moved past it. But understand if you have that going on, let's say in a meeting, that somebody's just questioning, that it really isn't about you or the subject. It's that 6 trying to get an internal feel of certainty because that's how they feel safe. So I hope I said that well enough. Most 6s do know that they run a lot of anxiety. Sometimes you run into a very counterphobic 6 who doesn't. But if you dig deep enough, you'll find it. And the underlying fuel or the driver or where most of the exiles are going to be here is fear. This does not mean that they have more fear than the other 6 types on the Enneagram. It just means that fear is more of a driver of the personality structure and the type. So I hope that was clear enough. That's 6. If I go down one more, I go down to 5. 5 we call the observer. Sometimes people call it the thinker and like that. I'm not at the moment connecting to other names, but observer is the one that I know. And the observer sometimes is somebody that you can see physically because they are literally back in themselves. One of the descriptions I got from a 5 observer one time, long time ago, was that it's as if they're standing slightly behind themselves, if that communicates to any of you. And these are people who really lean into mental skill, who go into their mind to get away from, and the childhood pattern here would have been either being completely ignored or the opposite, being completely overwhelmed and intruded upon. And I'm reaching for another word that I don't have. So the observers use their mind as an escape hatch. They also have an enormous thirst for knowledge. And I just realized as I'm saying that I dropped the focus of attention for 6. So let me just circle back there. The focus of attention for the 6 is harm and danger that could be in the universe. Okay. So back to 5. The focus of attention for the 5 is time and energy, because if you happen to be a 5, you believe that time and energy are both finite resources, which of course is not objectively true, but if you happen to be a 5, it feels that way. So working with a 5, you're always going to get questions about how long is this going to take and how much do you want from me and what do you want from me, because they're protecting themselves and that's the way they do it. What it looks like is somebody who goes very, very, very deeply into one subject at a time and is not satisfied with moving on before they're really sure that they've got the whole thing knocked. The talent here is to know when they really can see all sides of a subject and when they're really, really good at it. There's a 5 in the Enneagram community who's been around forever, who is a dear friend. I think he's been studying the Enneagram for 40 years. His Enneagram book came out 3 years ago because he's been working on it all that time because it just wasn't enough. So that's really interesting. I'm gonna just step to the side for 1 second because somebody's asking a question about children. My view, backed by a lot of experience, is that you cannot reliably type anybody who's younger than about the mid-20s. You can see some learning patterns that look like type that are useful. And you can try some interventions with types that because of what it looks like. But until they really get into their 20s, it isn't going to be clear. That doesn't mean it's not there. But I really think that it could be very limiting to a child to try to type them. My own younger daughter is a textbook 8 and has been all the way through, but I can tell you that when before she got into her 20s, she could have been anything. So it just really doesn't fully develop. And I personally think that it's not a great idea, except if you're working in trying to help them with learning and that kind of stuff.
Can I interrupt you?
Yeah.
Who wrote the book that was a 5? What was the book?
Jerry
Is that the one? Is that the work one that you really like?
Mm-mm. No, Jerome Wagner, 9 Lenses on the World, is very, very, very comprehensive, and I love him. He's just one of the nicest, smartest guys I've ever met. And it took him all that time because it wasn't good enough until it was. He's a founder of the International Enneagram Association, so that's 5. On the other side, and again, this is being driven by fear. Underlayment is fear. I've never met a 5 who doesn't know that they run high anxiety, and I've also never met a 5 who doesn't think that they're terrible at connecting with other people, which is actually not true, but they think it is. There are some 5s who will go so far as to try to mimic connection, watching somebody else and following it, almost like acting, as a way to learn. I personally have a friend who calls herself a 4.5 for that tendency. But remember that reserve and that aloofness does not mean they don't want to connect. It just means that they think they can't. Okay, the last one, 7, is the opposite. The 7s of the world are the optimists. So I said before what epicure means. And And it means wanting the best of everything in the world and always seeking the next. My teacher, David Daniels, used to say that sevens were planning for pleasurable possibilities. And repeat, planning for good. So what this creates is a future focus and a very finely tuned ability to plan things, usually from 30,000 feet. They tend to be innovators. There are a lot of entrepreneurs here. The problem can become that they hate anything that's boring. And the new idea or the new innovation is fascinating, but the work it takes to put that into practice is boring. So they're really great in the ideation phase, but then when it comes to moving it forward, they want somebody else to do it because they're on to the next. Now, I'm exaggerating a little bit, but somebody who hadn't done much work on themselves is going to look like this, and it's very hard to pull it back. Now, the question that's going to come up is, how is this a fear type? Because most, I don't know if that's correct. I was going to say most sevens don't know that they're afraid, but I don't think that's true. There are a lot of sevens who don't know that they're afraid. There are a lot who run a lot of anxiety, but it's going to be about planning and logic and what's next. They're chronically overbooked. Their focus of attention is on planning for positive possibilities and the next option. And their planning ability is such that they can plan a vacation, and by the time they actually get there to be on the vacation, they're disappointed because they've already had it in their mind during the planning stage. So it's a very interesting, way to interact with the world. What's usually underneath it is can be huge trauma, can be very difficult childhood, can be somewhat like the 5, a situation where they had no emotional connections and had to learn to go into their mind. A lot like that. Somebody just gave me the answer here. If you don't plan, you're not a 7. Just, that's it. The planning is the focus of attention, along with those pleasurables. And my little dog here is counterpointing. So that's the head types. And I don't know what I forgot, but maybe the chat will remind me.
That's okay. I just want to say we have about 18 minutes left, and I want to make sure we get to the other types and talk a little bit about the C's.
All right, I'm going to go faster. Let's go to the next slide. Okay, so 8, 9, and 1. Since I'm a 9, I'll say this is the correct view of the world. Not. Lead with our sensations. So the commonality between 8, 9, and 1, even though we do a lot of mental processing and all of that stuff, is that we won't ever actually make an important decision unless it feels right. That all of that thinking and all of that research and all of that everything comes down to, does it feel right, gut instinct. That's true of 9. It's 2 of 1 and 2 of 8. So the differences between the types are we're all into the knowledge of the body. We all care a lot about control. That does not mean we want to control you. It usually means we don't want to be controlled. Harmony is a big deal, especially in the 9. Physical comfort is a big deal, especially in the 9 or an 8 who leans to 9. And here's a key piece for all you therapists and coaches. If you have an 8 or 9 or a 1 in your practice, the most important thing you can do is validate that you have heard them. They don't necessarily care, with some exceptions, that you agree with them, but they absolutely need to know that you heard them. So in my coaching practice, when this runs up, I do a lot of paraphrasing back to make sure that I'm signaling that I understood what was being said. Absolutely key for me. What's underneath is anger, and it doesn't mean that they're more angry than other people. It means that anger is a driver. So in the case of the 8, yes, it is anger, and it comes up really fast, and it comes out really hard, and everybody else is horrified, and the 8 is like, oh, I feel better now. Well, all of you, I'm sure, have met some people like this. I happen to live among them, but that's how it works. There are 8s who've taught themselves not to do that, but anger is a really big piece, and speed. One 8 I know says that she feels like she goes through life with her hand on the suppress button all the time because she has so much energy and so fast that she has to be able to catch herself. The 9, different than that, is much more laid back. This is the go along to get along. We blend in with everybody else. The focus of attention, for the 8 is power and control. Who has the power? Are they going to be fair? Again, they don't necessarily want power over you as long as you're not trying to control them. The focus of attention for the 9, and I apologize for the speed here, is other people's agendas. Because we are so intent on blending in, and because the talent of 9 is to see the validity in all sides of competing arguments, it becomes very difficult for us to take a position, especially if it's around people we care about. So we look at what other people do, others' agendas, and we attach ourselves to that because we think that's more important than us. There's a huge amount of unlayering that can happen here. It's been incredibly helpful to me to learn this and to learn IFS and to really work with these parts. And the last one is the one which is the perfectionist, where it's all about getting it right. The focus of attention is errors and mistakes. You will find ones who have done a fabulous presentation and see one tiny error that nobody else even noticed and get completely obsessed with it. Those are some interesting parts to work with. They tend to, where the 8 expresses anger, the 9 tries to numb it out and pretend it doesn't exist. The 1 actively suppresses it because there's a decision made inside the 1 that anger is a bad thing. So there's a suppression, and we all know what happens when you suppress something too much, you get eruptions. In 1s, they are very, very rare. So I have gone as fast as I possibly could. I know I've left things out. Tammy, I'm going to hand it back to you because
Yep, that's good. And take some water and take a deep breath. You did awesome, Joan. You told us so much information in such a short period of time. So I know I said this in the chat, but I just want you to notice the parts as Joan's describing these types. You can hear the parts. You can hear the protective parts, and you can hear the exiles underneath of them.
I got to interrupt you from the chat. The 8 is called the protector now. We used to call it the boss. The 9 has always been called the mediator. Some types call it the peacemaker. And in my school, we call the 1 the perfectionist. I've seen others call it the ethical person or the moral person or something like that. But just to pick up that thread, and now I'll be quiet.
And I am sorry that you guys can hear me even though, so I'm sorry that we did go through that. Someone has a part that's sad, and I do apologize for the 8, 9, and 1s that did not get their fair share. Can we go to the next slide? Thanks, love. So I don't think we're going to can we go to the next slide? Let's skip that slide.
Yeah.
So one of the things that I think that we want to say, and then I think we should probably end and just sort of ask questions, Joan, so I don't know what we're thinking, but one of the things that we have started playing with is the idea that all types have a C quality that feels more like accessible to them. And so you can see this. I know this is small. We can see this as sort of, this is one of our ideas. I'm pointing to it with my pen, which I don't know why I'm doing that. But on the types, you can see like 1, 5. I can't see that on my computer. There we go. 1, 5, and 9. Oh, thanks. Is that Sarah doing that? Thank you, Sarah.
Yeah.
Love you, Sarah. So the 1, 5, and 9, that's going to be calm. So the idea is that is a C quality that's either more accessible or you can get to a little bit quicker. And so it might be good to know that as your type, that's going to be a C quality that not that you can create, right? We can't sort of just make those C qualities happen. But those might be C qualities that feel more comfortable for you or just more accessible. I mean, this is sort of the best way I can say it. And this is just an idea. We might not be completely right about it, but it's just an idea. I think it's just like how there's common exile energy and common themes of exiles in each type. There's also common self energy and common C qualities in each type.
Good.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
again, this is part of our hypothesis. And at that, I think we want to go to questions. I'm going to ask you, though, to try to ask questions that are not so specific that they don't that they can't go to everybody. I'm happy to email with some of you later if you have something really important. But if you could ask more general questions, I guess is what I'm asking you to do. So there's one here that says, I'd be curious about how those type C quality connections might be reflected in self-like parts. That's a really, really good question, and that's a part of our exploration. The group that we're doing right now, and we may add a second one, is a group of mostly therapists and a couple of coaches, where we're actually exploring using the types in the groups as the source material, and that's one of the pieces that we're going to go to. If you can go to the last slide, please. I think you have to skip over a couple. Yeah, the one.
I think it's that one. Yeah, that one. You guys can't really see that one, but that has I'm going to go ahead and just put that in the chat. Go ahead, Joan. I'm sorry. I'm going to put our information in the chat.
Yeah. And the slides will be made available. But we're thinking in this about self-like parts. We're thinking about, again, expanding our lists of common projectors, common managers, and all of that. As a 7, I feel very courageous. Could be wings of 6 and 8. Also could be really strong connection to optimism and to the upside. 7s have an ability to step out of really difficult situations and see the upside where the rest of us don't. So that courage could be that as well. It could also be the wings. Do I have a similar table? Wait a minute, I just lost it. For some common aspects? No, not yet. Not yet. That's something we're working on.
Can you say more, Joan, about the idea of parts in types, like how you find your parts in types? I think that's what that question means.
How do you find your part in the type? Okay,
I think that I can answer that. Do you want me to answer it?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. I mean, I think when I think about, like, so say a 3, I can say the 3. Sorry. So you can hear when Joan is describing the part, right? Effective, productive, my sort of how I handle emotion, how I handle time. Those are all parts. Like you can hear those sort of describing. So the part that makes sure I'm really effective, sort of manager, like you can hear the manager parts, right? The part that says like, I've got to be effective and I got to be productive and I got to da-da-da-da-da. Sort of you can hear in the descriptor of the type is the part, potentially, right? A part that's their goal or that's their motivation or that's their agenda. Does that make sense? I hope that makes sense. So in sort of the words we're using to describe the type, those are words that your parts are going to be, those are going to be sort of agendas of your parts. And it might look a little bit different depending on your wing and your connected type. But that's how I'm thinking of it.
All right, I want to jump in here because there's some stuff in the chat that I really want to comment on. It's really, really tempting to try to type other people. Really tempting, and it's a really bad idea. We don't know what Dick is. I, as an expert, could come up with some possibilities, but only Dick knows.
And you have.
I have. And I really think that until and unless he decides he wants to tell us, we really don't know. The reason that is so important is that if you start thinking that you know what you're seeing in somebody else, you are bound to make some critical mistakes. And like I said, I've been doing this a million years. And it happens. And when it happens, it can be really destructive. And I think we should be really careful about typing other people. So let's just, again, as I said, hold it lightly. Okay.
So one thing I want to plug, because you haven't said anything about this, but Joan has these typing cards. So I don't know if you can see it in this tiny, tiny slide, that if we ever do this again, we will definitely do this differently. I'm sorry that these are so small. But Joan has these typing cards that are incredibly helpful. Each card has basically, each card is the type, and it has like the words the type says. So it's just very helpful in learning about type and just helping you understand your type better. So I highly recommend the cards. You can get them. Joan's offering a special price of $25. Go to her website, which is creativecollaborations.com.
No,
and they're
.net.
very,
.net.
it's .net. Oh, sorry. .net.
Oh, it's wrong on the slide. Oh,
I
boy.
know. Sorry. Oh, no.
That's a problem. We're gonna have
I
to
think
fix
people can figure it out. We'll fix it.
it. Okay. Yeah.
What
good.
else? We have 5 minutes. What else do you feel like you want them to know?
Curious about if you're born with a sensory.
Yes. Right. Like if someone is born with sort of with like loss of hearing, does that affect your type? Or you're born? Yeah. It's an interesting question.
I do not know the answer to that, but it brings up something else, which is very relevant to therapists. The Enneagram as we know it is basically designed for relatively normal functioning people. You really cannot use this with somebody who's in the depths of severe trauma or severe psychiatric issues. It's not reliable in those situations. If they can come out of it and can come up with some self-energy, maybe. But I would be very, very careful about assigning types to particular clients. That said, it's kind of like with the kids. You can use some of the interventions that we know of to try to work with certain behavioral things that you see. For example, a 9 kid who is so daydreamy that they can't do their work, or a client who, can't stick to a schedule or something like that. But be very careful about using this in those situations. In terms of a hearing disability, I don't know. I do know that we've had sight compromised and hearing compromised people in our trainings, but I can try to find the answer for you. I haven't seen it often.
So
Okay.
we do want you guys to feel free to email us, ask us more questions. Joan and I are probably, or we are going to do a podcast series. We haven't figured that out yet because I'm being a very lazy podcaster these days. So we are going to do a podcast series at some point, probably really soon. So look for that. And then
And we also have, for those of you that are IFS therapists, you don't have to be IFS certified, but who are therapists or coaches, we have a once-a-month exploration group. I think that the current group is almost full, but if there's enough interest, we are willing to start a second one. We don't like to take more than 15 or 18 people in these groups because we want you all to get enough personalized attention. And the subject is the intersection of the two systems. So that's part of our exploration. And a lot of that is what's going to provide the information for the podcast series. So we wanted to point that out. I did see in the chat some requests about workshops. That is also on the table. I've been hesitant because I'm still a little hesitant about doing this stuff online, but Tammy is teaching me that it's okay. We're hoping that soon we can do an in-person. What I usually do is a 1 day or a 2 day over a weekend. And those are the kinds of things we're thinking about. So I just want to thank Tammy for being the best presenter partner in the history of the world, and my dear, dear friend, and all of you, all 100 and something of you, which is a little daunting to this 9, for all the really great comments and questions and everything else. if you go to my website, Creative Collaborations, you have to click on Enneagram to find the cards. If you can't find it, send me an email. And my correct email is in the slides, which will be posted. Tam?
Joan, you know, I love you. I adore you. I could sit and listen to you all day long. And I just am so grateful for you. You're such a good friend to me.
All right. Thank you all for your attention. And the people that are telling me I've met them, I'm sending hugs and kisses to all of you. And Rhonda, thank you so much. See ya.
Yes. Yes.
I think we're out.
Okay.
Not yet.